Hello, Stephen White, Steve Arts 89, formerly Trekboy 89. Yes, Season 2, Episode 12 of Star Trek Discovery, Through the Valley of Shadows. It was getting good, and then it went bad. But it's looking up. So let's just go down into that valley, that little rabbit hole. Okay, first season, disaster. Second season, change of tone. Rampant time travel, explaining different realities, different timelines, just any issues you want to have with the show not lining up with canon for the rest of the series, kind of saved it. Was giving it a chance. And then they brought in some elements that are really frustrating. I don't want to use the S word. But let's just talk about what happens in the episode. Well, we finally see a D7 ship. Basically, there's two stories happening. First is that Pike has to go to the Klingon Empire. So yes, we see the Klingons again, although the designs are much better. They're much more in between Next Gen and First Season Discovery, as opposed to the last episode where one of them looked, the proportions of his head were so ridiculous, it looked like the actor was struggling in the fight scenes to like balance this bulbous. It just looked comical and ridiculous. They look like aliens from Lost in Space, the bad episodes when they had like paper mache head aliens, and that's not what I'm expecting from a 2019 series that costs 7 or 8 million an episode. So but this one, yes, improved, much more balanced. They're obviously transitioning from one to the other, and I'm guessing that will be explained on some level as genetic issues after all the mutations that were featured in Star Trek Enterprise, which is the only way to explain it, that they started off one way and they went through mutations trying to resolve the issues that came from all the genetic engineering that they did in Enterprise. So I'm okay to let that go as long as they now have hair and don't have giant ridiculous heads on all of them, just some of them. There can be a section of the Klingons that look like the Discovery Klingons. That was what they promised us, that this was just a sect of the Klingon Empire, a religious sect that had been separated for, and that's why they were different from the others. But then they showed all the Klingons to look like that, and it just rattled everyone's cage. That was one of the first big upsets for season 1 because it made no sense. They've made it make sense. And they just introduce new things that don't make sense. The time crystal, the magical time crystal. When you think of things like this as something like, there's an alien race, they found a time crystal, Star Trek, new civilizations, whatever, okay. But no, apparently the Klingons have always had these time crystals. They apparently grow naturally on one of their planets, and there's a bunch of religious Klingons who live in a monastery and hide this secret that everyone knows about. L'Rell knows about. She tells Vok. Vok tells Pike. Everyone knows about these secret time crystals, which, if weaponized, could destroy the whole universe. Oh my god. These are the kind of plot holes you fall in and you can't get out. You can't get out. You can't enjoy the show because you are in a plot hole trying to claw your way back out. You can't do it. I'm trying so hard to like this series, and in some ways you can like and enjoy individual elements of individual episodes, but there are these overall things that just you can't get past. So I don't know how they're going to pull themselves out of that hole and explain the magical time crystals. If somehow everyone who knows about them is killed, and these Klingons who are absolutely the opposite of everyone else in their race, who would have weaponized this in a second and ruled the universe, who now live in a monastery instead. Now, I guess there's some chance if it was hidden, it could stay hidden. I don't know. But so that's the main sticking point, because that's a new point. The Klingons, like L'Rell, when she talks, the first scene she was in, every episode you could hear her having trouble speaking with the Klingon teeth and the makeup and everything. In the second episode, apparently, second main scene she was in, They seem to have looped her voice and dubbed her voice because only very few words sounded off. The rest of it sounded quite clear. So I'm guessing they watched the first set of dailies and for some reason didn't fix them, but in this next scene did, or something changed. So there's an inconsistency there, which is driving me mad because it's just so hard to listen to the Klingons when they talk because you're so aware of the makeup and the false teeth and everything, which they had on the original, not on the original, but on Next Gen in the movies. They had that. But yet, with Discovery, it impedes the actors to the point that it just draws so much attention to the artifice of the makeup and that you can't get into believing and suspend your disbelief to realise, to think, oh, there's a Klingon, they're talking. So, I'm trying to get through the complaints early. So, yeah, Klingons are back, they've still got problems. The time crystal's back, and if it was somewhere in the future or put somewhere on a story with an individual alien race that wasn't known to the rest of the Federation, that just one crew encountered or something, you could kind of understand it. But the idea that the Klingons have this technology, this magic, and they don't use it, or it's not discovered, or it's not exploited. All that is protecting it is a bunch of monks in a monastery with batleths. Oh my god. It's okay, so we're going to get off that and leave the last problem for the end. Okay, so while they're dealing with this, because Pike has to go into the monastery to get the crystal, and he's sort of put through some test where he's basically told that seeing the future, interacting with the future, can affect you, can cause madness. The quote was, "When future becomes the past, the present will be unlocked." The warning was, the present is a veil between anticipation and horror, and madness can follow or will follow. So basically Pike sees his future. We all know it's horrible. He gets just melted by radiation, saving a bunch of cadets on a training cruise, training mission, and he ends up spending the rest of his life, up until episode 16 in the original Star Trek, in a life support chair, basically, a portable life support system, basically, and he can barely communicate. He does escape this in the cage, through the reused footage of the cage, which actually is the menagerie where he is returned. He goes to Talos 4 in the cage, and he's returned in the Menagerie Part 2, where he basically lives in this fantasy world where he's back to himself and healthy and living, and he lives in his mind with Vina, who is doing the same thing because her body was also damaged when her ship crashed. So we know how his story is going to end, and what it seemed to be saying to me is, if you take this time crystal, if you take this step, you will fix your timeline, or that you will be in this one timeline and this is your fate in it. So this is what you're choosing by doing this. So I'm not quite sure what all that meant or what it was supposed to mean, but it's kind of difficult because you know that the series is not following most of the lines of the original series. So in theory, it's not going to end up in the same place. And by using time travel and all these problems with the Red Angel, you can get around that, and then you can have things go differently, and it doesn't matter. So while they're establishing that he is going to end up in that place in the original series, it's like, in order for that to happen, they'd have to re-establish everything and put everything back where it was. Or maybe there's just certain elements of in each timeline that are going to match up. There are things that are fate. So there's a bit to think about with that, but I was too busy thinking about how stupid the time crystals being kept by the monks was that I didn't really think about till I'm talking about it now. So that's something to look at more. I don't know how they're going to run through the season, finish the season off with these time crystals, and how they're going to use them, or if they will appear in the future series. So there'll be time to think about them after season 2 or season 3, or wherever they come up again if they do. So I'll talk about that another time. So he goes, he gets the crystal, he finds out his fate, and then they've got this crystal to use in relation to time travel, so they can pursue, or basically they've got some ability to manipulate time to deal with these time issues coming from the Red Angel, changing time and going in and out of time. So a lot of it's unclear. I don't really understand why they're doing a lot of things that they do. So now we get to the other story, which is that Burnham talks Pike into letting her go to find Leland, who now is invested with the AI, which isn't sentient but yet is acting sentient and trying to preserve itself and destroy its enemies. And so there's that other issue, which I forgot to list in my little section of faults, is that the AI already exists, it's already sentient, so how are they going to stop that from happening since it's already happened? Why do they think they can stop it? What does the other 55% of data that it didn't get from the sphere, what difference does that make now? And just so much of it doesn't make sense, and whether that's just the nature of time travel stories, or whether it's because the writers don't know what they're doing, or the writers are trying to fix problems that, and the showrunners are trying to fix problems that were already left for them by the other showrunners that were fired. There were 3 showrunners that were fired. But yep, they get there. We have one good scene where we discover that the humans have all been blown out of the Section 31 ship, because they're tracking a Section 31 ship, which is what I meant to say. They had found this Section 31 ship that was out of place. They found one person alive, someone who originally was on the Shinzo with Burnham, and of course he turns out to be possessed by the AI and infested with nanoprobes, and eventually they defeat him because Spock's Spock and he manages to save Burnham. But this was all to try and convince or convert Burnham, because she apparently is, of course, the one factor that is affecting everything, changing everything, could possibly save the universe. So they had to go back, since she was a variable they apparently couldn't predict or control. They had to try and go back and convert her. Doesn't happen. They go back to the ship, and suddenly they're being surrounded by Section 31 ships, and their solution is to blow up the ship. Now, considering they have a technology that can transfer them hundreds of light years away, or thousands of light years away, where they can just sit casually and sip their tea while they work out how the hell to deal with this sphere data and how to protect it from the future. Self-destruct must just be a cliffhanger for that episode, and then at the start of the next episode they're going to go, oh, just wait a minute, we've got the spore drive. There are other options. We don't have to blow up the ship. We have other options to find the time to try and work this out. So obviously they're not going to blow up the ship. But part of me just said, just blow up the ship, and they did. And I'm like, well, that was a bit too easy and a bit too simple. That's why it was the first thought I had, and yet they acted on it. So, yeah, huge gaping plot holes. Klingons are still annoying, but they're used much more sparingly, although making them the holders of these time crystals just makes the rest of the whole of Star Trek so messy. The fact that they were never mentioned, found, utilised, weaponized, destroyed, or maybe that is what happens at the end of the series. Maybe they blow up that planet. There's no way of telling what's going to happen, because I don't think they have any idea what they're doing, or didn't. Okay, so on the bright side, actually, I'm going to make a separate video about that. There is no bright side to this actual episode. I mean, the scenes on the ship with the Borg, because basically that's the other big issue. It appears the AI is going to be the beginning of the Borg, which is a whole other video as well, whole other conversation. And they're setting that up, that the Borg started in the past, or that the AI is the beginning of the Borg, or going to be some part of the Borg. I didn't even want to think about that when it became obvious last week. So I'm just leaving that for now, because I can't deal with it at the moment. But that's what people are suggesting. That's what it looks like. That's probably what's going to happen.